co-learning spaces is to come together and to have these sessions regularly, picking up on themes that are coming from the cans across the country now, which is really exciting. So Johannesburg, the Eastern Cape, the broader we can stretch, the broader we can learn. And so we're very excited that we're able to bridge the kind of in the day-to-day of the work of the cans, and be able to start reflecting on the work given the COVID-19 crisis, but also potentially thinking, how do we adjust to the new normal, and potentially further crises that may come our way. So we encourage cans to bring ideas and co-host topics. So if you have a theme that you think is not being covered, please, you're welcome to contact myself, or to even, you know, on the CAN admin group, to be able to have these conversations, and we enable multiple conversations and discussions. So this is really exciting. So just a bit of Zoom admin. We are recording this to enable people who are not able to attend today to be able to access it. It's also a beautiful archive of the work that we're doing. So unfortunately, if there is something that you feel uncomfortable sharing on a recorded platform, please save your ideas and find a safe way to communicate to one of the teams if you feel you would like to share your thoughts, but not in a recorded setting. We have two kind of processes happening here, in the sense that I'll be facilitating today's session, and then we have my colleague Karen, who's in the background helping with letting people into the Zoom, triaging. But again, as much as we try to make sure that there's no technical hiccups, we apologize ahead of time if there are any technical hiccups. Just put it to the ghost in the machine. In order to help our colleagues who don't have access to a stable data mechanism or whatever, please could you kindly keep your cameras off, but when we open for conversation, you are welcome to put your camera on. As the facilitator, I will keep my camera off and on, so you will see that I will oscillate between the two. This just helps with data, unfortunately. We need to be able to cater for that. A reminder that if you're not speaking, to please mute your microphone. It's quite difficult for us as the team to keep track of that, and we want to give our speakers the maximum space to speak. Okay, I think I've got everything covered. And then when we open up for conversation, you can use the raise the hand feature, which is on the participants. If you look at your participants list, you'll see that it'll give you an option, reactions and raise hand. And please feel free at all times to put your questions, thoughts, ideas into the chat. We will be reflecting on that. So without any further ado, I am happy, especially my tummy is grumbling at the thought of this topic today. And we're looking at from community kitchens to just food systems. And this is again part of the Inspired Futures dialogue. So we're thinking about where are we now and where can we be and where can we go. And we have three wonderful speakers today. Ilka Stein from the Makers Valley Community Action Network group in Gauteng Together. And then we have Ntuthu Blow from Makhanda Circle of Unity Food Security Cluster in the Eastern Cape Together. And then Brittany Kesselmen, C19 Food Group, Food Systems and Food Security Researcher. So the way that the process will go today is that we will have a little bit of a teach-in to put us into the context of why are we here, why are we talking about this. And then we will hear from Ilka and Ntuthu from their experiences. And then we'll end off with, please remember to put your microphone on mute if possible. Thank you. Okay, so before we start, I would like to just ground us this morning. It's a chilly morning in Cape Town. So please put your feet on the ground if you can in a safe space. Close your eyes. And I'd like you to take a deep breath in, out through the mouth. And then if you're able to, just warm up the fingers a bit. Warm up the head, gently, gently. Put down everything that's on your to-do list or to-be list. And for now, you're here in this room with us all together to talk about from community kitchens to just food systems. So Brittany, over to you.
Thanks, Toko, and good morning, everyone. I've been asked to just give a little bit of context for our conversation today. Since we're talking about heading towards a just system, that means understanding the injustice of the current food system. And I'm pretty sure that everyone on the call does understand that, and that's why we're all here. But just to emphasize that the current food crisis that we're in now with COVID-19 isn't something new. South Africa has been in a food crisis for a very long time. And this is not due to any shortage of food in the country. There's more than enough for everyone if it were fairly distributed. But because our food system is so unjust, large numbers of people don't have access to sufficient food. And basically, the system can be understood as being unhealthy, unjust, and unsustainable. So it's unhealthy in terms of producing high levels of malnutrition and hunger. The latest data from April of this year found that 47% of people ran out of money to buy food before the end of the month, basically half the country. And then at the same time that it's producing this hunger, it's also producing hidden hunger, which means people who may be eating enough calories to sustain them, but are not getting the nutrients they need for a healthy life. And the levels of hidden hunger are even higher. And alongside that, an increasing number of non-communicable diseases that are related to unhealthy diets of processed starch, sugar, fat, and salt, which is mostly what people are able to afford. And then the injustice of that, of course, is that we do have enough food for everyone, but people are not able to access it due to poverty and inequality. And that in the food system, a small number of companies are making very high profits while the majority of people are not getting enough food. And you see in the food sector some of the highest pay gaps in the country in terms of the difference between the wages of the executives and the workers. So the people who are producing our food as farm workers or selling us our food in retail are not actually able to afford the products of their labor, while the executives of those companies are in the top earners in the country. And then the food system is unsustainable, firstly, because of this horrible inequality, but also environmentally unsustainable. Our food system uses a lot of toxic chemicals and produces a lot of waste and pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. And at the same time, it produces food that is unhealthy and unsafe. We see that industry routinely ignores safety regulations, and then we find ourselves in situations like the listeriosis outbreak a couple of years ago. So that's the context in which all of the cans and all of us are operating, trying to improve access to good, healthy food that's more environmentally sustainable for everyone. And with that, we can start our talks.
Thank you so much, Brittany. That's really helpful. And I think if you have any thoughts about any of the words that we're using, because language is so powerful, please feel free to throw out some ideas and definitions that you are using in your particular context when we talk about community kitchens, when we're talking about healthy food, when we're talking about just systems, that'll be really useful. So as promised, we will now go to Ilka, who will talk through their experience around her work in Gauteng. Ilka, over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Toko, and thanks, Brittany, for setting us up with this. I will just share my screen. I've just put a few slides together. Hopefully this will help the conversation. And yeah, Brittany, I think two elements that you mentioned now, I think is really guiding the work that we've been doing in the CAN. I just put up a brief overview of what we call our network of. We'll see that it has actually by now evolved quite a bit. What I'm going to talk about is our so-called food hub in the middle, as well as was mentioned, the community kitchens, and also kind of what is our planned way forward at the moment. At Makers Valley, we right from the beginning we're trying to set up a more holistic system. So besides the food parcels and the community kitchens, to also see how else can we provide access to food. And a really interesting link that is working really well for us, and that is also our attempt to ensure that even if you don't, let's say, even if you don't qualify or if you don't get the access to food parcels, because of course that is very limited amount, and it's kind of very often spread out support. And community kitchens, as they run, at least in our community at the moment, we're able to do them twice a week. So also that is obviously not in the long run a very sustainable way. So we were thinking around and wondering how else can we provide access to food. And what we've established now since July is what we call our community swap shop. And it's a link between community members can come to us at 3 different times a week and bring recyclables. And for those recyclables, they receive points, and those points they can use here in our community swap shop once a week. And we normally have food and sanitary items there. And then once a month, we have a clothing swap shop there as well. So for us, that was really one way of saying, even if you don't have, for whichever reasons, access to food parcels that are handed out, or if the community kitchens that are running twice a week are not enough, here's always a way that you can actually, by contributing yourself, by bringing recyclables, you can get access to food. And it's really well taken up by the community. I will show you a few pictures just now. And all of that, and that's kind of what I want to focus on a little bit in the conversation today, all of that is supported by what we call our food hub. So we do have a centralized
oh my God.
where we receive where we get food donations. It's a lot of surplus food, so we've linked with SA Harvest and NOSH, but you also see we are quite fortunate to have one of a large organization in very close proximity, so we also receive support from local organizations. And these food donations are then on the one hand used for the community swap shop, and on the other hand are used to support the 6 community kitchens that are running, as I mentioned, twice a week. So just to point out a few of the challenges. So we definitely can feel that the amount of donations and also the surplus food is getting, becoming less and less over the week. So in the beginning, was very comfortable for us there. We had good networks, and we were very sure that we could always offer the food, and that we could always support also the community kitchens. And at the moment, we can see that it's getting more and more difficult for us to do that. We try, and that's, I think many of you know, with surplus food, as amazing as it is, it's also a little bit of a black box very often. It's highly unpredictable of what we get. And at times it's really difficult to package it and to cook it or to do something with it which is actually healthy and nutritious. So we had times where we were sitting on boxes and boxes of chips and flavored water, and that obviously is not really helpful. So we're facing those challenges, and we're thinking around how we can manage that. When possible, we are looking to purchase fresh produce from our local farmers. So we have the Green Business College and the amazing Ubuntu project very close by, and if we can, we're supporting the local economy there, the local farmers, and trying to get fresh produce from there, as well as if you ever come to Joburg and are in the proximity, make sure that you visit Mam Refiwe at Birchworm's Community Garden. And so we're trying to link it in, but we can see that, yeah, we need to think beyond that. So just a few stats. So at the moment, we have 6 community kitchens running twice per week, and each of them are serving around 70 to 80 meals each time. And they receive their food at the moment entirely from our food hub. And we also, through the food hub, kind of manage the gas supply for them. And then what I was talking about earlier in parallel, the big other pillar for us is the swap shop. And we started beginning of July, and it has an average of 130 people who actually use it very regular. And just to give you an idea how that looks like, just a few pictures. This is Zweli from Lock Recyclables. So this is an organization that already before the lockdown was working in the community on recyclables. They have taken up that task. And you very often in our community now see people running around with these blue bags, bringing their recyclables back to us, getting points on this. And this is an example how the swap shop looks like. And this is how our starter kit for the 6 community kitchens look like. Now, what I would like to say is, I think facing the challenge, what I mentioned earlier, but also really driven by the question on how do we make that more sustainable? So I would imagine, similar to a lot of cans, Makers Valley Partnership and the Makers Valley can, we stepped in April to kind of fill the gap and to offer the immediate need. But it is actually not as such our capacity to continuously run the food hub as well as all those community kitchens. So what the process we're embarking on now is that we, as the CAN and the Makers Valley Partnership, we want to facilitate a short incubation process where we want to help the volunteers and community members who are at the moment running both the food hub as well as the community kitchens to actually start thinking about how can we turn that into a more sustainable structure. And we had lots of conversations already internally, and we now just decided actually it would be good if it is formed into yeah, maybe a business model for social enterprises or however you want to call it, but really as a team together brainstorm ideas where possible funding streams, not only on the food side, but also on the financial side. How can we set that up? How can we secure the access of food donations? Which other partnerships do we need to link in? How would a long-term support from the food hub to the community kitchens look like? Can we offer additional skills now that maybe also turn into income streams? So potential of trainings that could be offered. And with all of that, and sorry, just a few ideas maybe that are floating around. So at the moment, for example, the gas supply to community kitchens, it's obviously a constant cost for us. the question would be, can we actually link it back into the recycling system? So can the community kitchens also recycle, receive points, and for those points, they can actually purchase gas? How else can we broaden this notion of a circular economy to help us create a more sustainable system there? So those are just a few thoughts. And with this, with a short incubation process, we actually do hope that we come to a point where we can discuss what is the best structure or legal form for such an entity. So are we talking NGO, are we talking a cooperative, or are there other hybrid forms? And yeah, then actually, and we're quite ambitious with this, we want to still have that up and running by the end of this year, so that it moves from an interim structure and the CAN structure that just came in to help and to support into a formalized structure that is then really anchored in the community and hopefully can support the community much longer in the future. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Ilka. It was really fascinating and useful as well, because you can feel the movement between how it's developing and how it's growing. I noted some words that we might want to think about collectively. There's over 63 of us on this Zoom call today. And there were just words that I thought we should try and put out there. For example, circular economy, incubator, business model. So often, and I'm talking for myself, we think we understand these terms, but what do they mean? So maybe there can be a little bit of sharing in the chat as we go along. So everybody, please note down your questions for Ilka and any thoughts, but we will swiftly move on to Ntuthu. The floor is over to you, and you can put your camera on.
Okay, I don't know. I'm struggling with my camera. Okay. Something, it just won't allow me. Can I go ahead in the meantime without wasting time?
Please, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay, my name is Ntuthu Blow. I'm a resident of Makhanda. I work for the Grahamstown Residents Association. Basically, we deal with service delivery issues. And so I got to be somehow affiliated to the Makhanda Circle of Unity Food Security Cluster. Well, for me, I'm not much of a public speaker, let me say, and also I'm going to say very little, and I will wait for questions later. But where I want to start is, for me, food or access to food is a human rights issue, and access to land is a human rights issue. So for me, I think one of the things that we would need to look at some point, because we need to look at government or the governance and policy making. And when I'm talking to policy making, I'm talking at the issue of meaningful involvement of society in lawmaking. And I also speak to change in policy, because the law as it is right now, it does not really stand to benefit the people who are actually feeling the gripes of crises like Corona. So I think if we look at the law, how it is and how it gives access and rights to people, and how people are so always excluded from understanding what the law is and understanding their rights and responsibilities where law is concerned. So I think this thing of access to food and access to land, it goes back to law. I don't know if I make sense, but I want to leave it at there right now. Then I'll wait for questions. Then I'll expand on that later. Thank you.
Ntuthu,
Yes.
yeah, I'm here. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing in Makhanda
Okay.
currently, given your reflection on access to land and access to food? What does it look like
my day
practically?
job is that my day job is that of an office administrator, but because the Grahamstown Residents Association deals with issues of service delivery, but you know, if you look at the way our society is structured, there's always issues of haves and have-nots. So in the township, issues of service delivery are not really a priority for people. People are always complaining about things that have to do with food. So now as GRA, we had to sort of try to be accommodative and also try to be relevant to the people in the township. Hence, it became easy for us to be involved in things like trying to raise funds and working with others to raise funds for the soup kitchens. So in going into the kitchens and finding what the kitchens were lacking, one of the things we've noted is that food is one of the things that people are lacking. And there is land, and the land has been turned into dumps, and it's a mission for people to get access so that they can start food gardens to that land. And as a matter of fact, one of the kitchens we were working with, they forced the way into starting a garden into a land that was just an illegal dump. So now they've started growing food in that space, because there was a lot of red tape and a lot of bureaucracy from the municipality for them to access such land. So they just did it anyway. So that's what I'm trying to get at when I'm saying that we need to look at the law and how it is not really helping people. I don't know if that answers what you're trying to get to.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And like you said, in the Q&A, we'll have an opportunity to go deeper and surface more. Thank you so much, Ntuthu.
Thank you,
I
Togo.
think you raised such an important point around this, in this conversation from community kitchens to a just food system. We cannot leave out the question of access to land and the question of agency. So if I understood your experience and the experience that you were seeing on the ground in Makhanda, was that you have community members who are able, willing, ready to feed themselves, but have no access to land to be able to make it sustainable. And we've seen similar cases here in some of the Cape Town cans as well around, okay, at least vegetables we should be able to provide easily. So what spaces? In my little neighborhood, I can share that we've begun to think about curb side gardens and community areas that should be available, schools. So asking questions around access to land, vis-a-vis being able to have the agency to feed oneself, or at least to put some part of your plate on, part of what needs to be on your plate on the table. Thank you so much. We're going to now turn to Brittany, who will close us out this morning in terms of looking at she gave us a little bit of a setting the scene, and now she will be able to give us, just setting you up, Brittany, with kind of examples, both South African and global, and some inspiration. Then we will open up for Q&A after that. So over to you, Brittany.
Thank you, and hi again, everyone. My job today seems to be context in general. So I'm actually going to focus on some international examples, just to give us some ideas that may or may not apply in our local context. And I was really happy to hear Ntuthu mention food as a right, because it absolutely is a human right. And what we can see is that in places where the government starts from the position of treating food as a human right, you often get a very different set of policies. I'll just run through a couple of examples. So let me see if I can do that. Okay. The first example is community kitchens in Peru. And basically, back in the 80s, Peru experienced some very severe economic shocks, which saw very rapid increases in food prices, as well as high levels of unemployment. So you had a lot of people who had migrated from rural areas to the cities suddenly finding themselves unable to afford food, which may sound familiar to us here. And so groups of women gathered together to collectively buy food and equipment and collectively cook for their families in order to save money. So this was entirely a community-driven response. They didn't have any donations or external support. They were using their own funds, but just pooling them for savings. And they would take turns cooking together, collectively make decisions about what they were doing. And they would sell the meals basically at cost, not charging for their labor, so that they would be very affordable. And then they would give the food for free to those who couldn't afford. After operating for more than a decade, some of these kitchens eventually started to get some support from government and other organizations. But one of the things that they did, while these were very localized community responses, they grouped their kitchens together into networks, and they used that sort of power of numbers and organization both to provide technical support and training and lesson sharing amongst each other, and also to do lobbying and advocacy with government to get support for their kitchens and also to get better food policies that would help their communities. So while it started out very local, they grouped together to find power in numbers. And over time, there were thousands of these kitchens all over the big cities in Peru. A second example are community food centers in Canada. These are NGOs, so they are registered as non-governmental organizations. They have sort of a three-pronged approach. So they provide emergency food, both in the form of a food bank and meals in the kitchens, but they also do a lot of skills development and capacity building. And so they hold trainings on cooking and food gardening and nutrition. They teach kids about food. They do a lot of education. And then they also have a third pillar, which is the advocacy work. So they recognize that their emergency responses are not changing the structures that caused the need for food in the first place. So they do a lot of advocacy work to change policy, both at the local government level and national level at the same time. And this one, as an NGO, works primarily through donor funding, although they do collect income also through some of their activities, and they do get some funding from government as well. It started out as one community food center, and then based on that successful model, they rolled out more of them all over the country. A third example is a pay what you can restaurant. So this can work in more of a mixed income area. They tend to be registered as a not-for-profit, like a Section 21 company or a PBO here. And they basically operate as a restaurant, looks and feels like a restaurant, but there aren't prices or there aren't required prices on the menu. Instead, there are suggested donations. So some people, I don't know if people can see on the sign in the picture, but if you have money, you can pay the full price and even a bit more to pay it forward for someone else. If you have less money, you pay whatever you can. And if you don't have any, that's fine. You don't have to pay, and you have the option of volunteering. Usually they ask for 1 hour of volunteer work in exchange for a meal. Very often these restaurants try to support the local economy by linking to local farmers and holding community events like talks and classes and other things. So these ones have a mixed funding model, usually based on a combination of donations and the income that they generate in the restaurant. And they have a mix of volunteer labor and paid labor, depending on the different space. And then my final example is popular restaurants or people's restaurants in Brazil. These are a government intervention. It's run by the municipal government, staffed by the municipal government, and these are big canteens that serve nutritious meals to anyone who wants them. There's no test or no requirement to be allowed to eat there. You can just walk in the door and have a meal there. The meals are subsidized, so no matter who you are, you're paying only about approximately 10 rand. But if you are development as someone who has a very low income, then you only pay 5 rand. And if you are registered as homeless, then the meal is free. They specifically try to procure from local farmers and farmers in the area to support their businesses. And they serve thousands of meals every day to anyone who needs them. So these are really successful, these canteens. but they're especially successful because they're part of a larger food security effort. And in Brazil, in the past, things have changed a little now, but in the city where this picture is taken in Belo Horizonte, these policies are still in place. They have a lot of different policies, all aimed at recognizing and supporting people's right to food and to good nutrition. So in addition to the popular restaurants, they have food banks that rescue food waste and redistribute it to orphanages and creches and other institutions. They provide healthy school meals to all children. They have municipal farm stalls in the city where farmers can come and sell their produce directly, and consumers can afford the fresh food. They also have municipal farmers markets where the city provides all of the infrastructure for people to sell. And they have subsidized grocery shops. That's what the smaller photo is. It's sort of like a fruit and veg shop, but there's a requirement that 20 basic ingredients have to be sold at a particularly low price so that everyone can afford it. And then government uses its own spending power in terms of these popular restaurants, but also school lunches, hospital food, all of those kinds of food that government buys to really support small scale and local farmers. And they also prioritize the ones who are growing agroecologically. So basically, those are just a few. There are many more examples from different parts of the world, but I wanted to just draw out some of the different aspects of those models and other models. So one of the things to consider is, where is the food sourced from? Is it purchased? And if it's purchased, are you prioritizing local businesses, or are you buying from large corporates? Is the food donated? Is it rescued food waste? Are you growing your own? Some of the community food centers have their own gardens, and some of the restaurants do as well. In terms of funding, is it the funds of the members? Are you getting donations, or is it government funding? Some of them also have alternative income streams, for example, running catering businesses. So you provide free meals to those who need it and earn income from catering on the side. The labor may be the members, it may be volunteers, it may be paid staff. There's generally an effort to make sure that if there is paid staff, that those should be good, decent jobs with fair wages and good working conditions. And then the beneficiaries, is it for everyone, like the popular restaurants or the pay what you can restaurants, or are you targeting specific vulnerable groups, or starting with the members and then expanding out to the community? And then the question of what other activities are happening, because just providing emergency food is very important, of course, but isn't changing the system. So is there advocacy work going on? Is there capacity building? Some of these places run trainings for people to be able to go and get jobs in the restaurant sector, or community events to link and build strength in the community. So there's a lot of different options, and I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Can you hear me all? There. Okay, I'm having technical issues. Can you all see me? Hear me? Can I have a thumbs up? Because of course
We hear
I can't
you.
see anyone. Ah, perfect. Okay, there's just a weird thing. Perfect. Thank you so much, Brittany. And can we all do some reactions, thumbs up, claps to all the speakers this morning? Thank you so much. And what I would like to do now is for everybody to take a moment, if you can access a pen or just your brain. I'm going to give you a minute to just think kind of, what have you learned? What is puzzling you? What would you like to know more about? And then we have a good about 20 minutes to open up for a conversation, Q&A. Some of our speakers have been answering some of the questions in the chat group, so I'm going to weed through those quickly while we have the minute downtime for you to think. And put your feet on the floor, take a deep breath, stretch, move those shoulders, and I will see you in a minute. Okay. My minute was a little bit longer. Right. There's some great questions coming through and some important points around the question. I'm just looking here on the interaction around the question, Erica's question on how we use land and how we make sense of land, and accessing what types of land can be accessed and which can't. And then also the idea, I think that we need to have a conversation about is that, and which is part of this work, is can everybody farm? Is everybody able to do back garden farms? So I think that's a very useful conversation, that if the interaction between why can't people use their own yards for growing food versus needing to access land. And it's also about scale. So if you're wanting to do a bigger project, it's harder to use your backyard. Chris has said the Department of Social Development has a center linked to the Eastern Cape, and they provide food free of charge, and the food is served in a community restaurant. So we have an example. Thanks, Chris. So we can look into that in more detail. So from this, I'm seeing mostly the questions have been answered. So can I open now for questions, thoughts? I'm opening up the space. Just put up your hand and I'll be able to see you. And yeah, please, you are welcome to put your video on if you would like to. Are people digesting the conversation?
Togo, can I ask something?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I saw some, I think Siabonga is the name. He says they are planting on pavements. And here in Makhanda, we've got an issue with stray animals. So for us, planting on pavements is a no-no at this moment. So can he maybe tell us if they've got an issue of stray animals, if they've had in the past, and if they've had, how have they dealt with it to enable them to be able to plant in the pavement and, you know, spaces like that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ntuthu. I actually had a similar question around our pavement gardens in terms of pollution. I've wondered, what does that mean? So Siabonga, would you be able to let us know how you're utilizing the pavements for street gardens? Or if you've started?
Oh, hi. Yes, we in the Makers Valley community, I think Ilka will talk more on that one. But we do work regards with like available spaces on like mostly like what's happening in our community. We have more guys that are actually just like dumping on the street corners. So that's how we took an advantage of that. And then by turning that into sort of like a garden, and then people then get involved in terms of like seeing it through running. And then obviously, then we don't really have like animals that really destroy the food that's on pavements. But what we do have like community buy-in, where they obviously now looking after those gardens, and also becomes easier in terms of the watering and also yeah, I think I've shared a little bit, but then we're probably gonna try and then send some videos or small pictures where you guys can also just see in terms of like getting more ideas as to how to go around with that one. I mean, we're also just exploring options of hydroponics, and then which is something that we're still gonna go into details on that one. We're just still waiting for some team that will come and actually show us through how to utilize some kind of hydroponics in terms of systems to utilize like any available pieces of land, because we are in an urban area at the end of the day. Thanks.
Thanks, Siabonga. So I see Susanna Coleman, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Toko, and greetings from Cape Town, where I work in a 3,000 hectare rural area in the middle of the Cape Flats, where the land is simply not available for small scale farmers. There are 4 giant industrial farmers, and the land that is not available is being illegally dumped on, exactly as Ntuthu explained, and being used for either left fallow or being illegally used for transport and that sort of thing. And I think we must be careful when we're talking about availability of land, because for people to be able to grow in their backyard is normal. Now that shouldn't be a remarkable thing that we're doing. The remarkable thing we should be doing is making peri-urban farmland available to small-scale farmers. Now, in the city of Cape Town, we have at least 500 people who are capable of growing food organically, but they don't have a square inch of land. They do have, there are churchyards and that sort of thing, but we have patchworks, huge patchworks of areas that have been planted up over the winter now that are just going to dry up in summer. There's small talk made by the city of Cape Town encouraging people to grow small gardens, but there's no congruent commitment to provide water or any relationship with the Department of Agriculture to make sure that well points are sunk for these gardens. And that's not sustainable in the long term. It's insane making the extent to which you have to go to be able to plant up a small piece of land, which will dry up anyway. And so I think we have to talk much bigger picture of utilizing our economic power, because we all buy food. We have to find a new way to look at how do we leverage our economic power to force policy, to force the food system who makes all the money out of us to subsidize that peri-urban farmland getting planted up. And especially in the Western Cape, which we know as the 4% land reform province. Land simply is not made available to brown-skinned farmers. And it will not be. When land reform comes along, then it's some ridiculous equity share plan where the existing farmer gets recapitalized to the tune of millions, and then the farm workers are shareholders. And there's a depth of indignity and humiliation to that is completely unacceptable. So I just wanted to take up Ntuthu on what she said about policy and government and mass action. Lack of the work that we're doing under COVID, and that it's prompted that, but it needs to translate into bigger actions, bigger dreams. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Susanna. And I think you raise a critical point that's actually come up in the chat, is that these things, and I have to declare my self-interest in this topic. I'm a daughter of a farmer, and my father was involved in many of the small-scale farming projects in Zimbabwe at the very beginning, and it is about it's a link in a chain. And I think, you know, I pulled out my constitution when Ntuthu mentioned the right to food, because we cannot talk about food gardens if we don't talk about the right to housing. We can't talk about the right to food if we don't talk about the right to access clean water. And within that, we start creating a clear understanding of what it means to be human in this space, and how much of that has been stripped away from us in multiple ways. And I can't farm to save my life. I've been trying to grow things in my garden and I'm hopeless. So it is a skill. It's not innate. It's not something you kind of wake up one morning and able to do. And it does take knowledge. And I think the point is raised in the chat that's very important about also dreaming about the kinds of foods that we're growing. You know, should we be growing maize in Cape Town? Are there indigenous foods that are more suited to the environment? What does it mean to farm under climate change, or do backyard farming under climate change when you can't easily access water? Somebody has raised that we have a short growing season in the Eastern Cape. So, you know, what do we do around that? And people are saying using traditional food preservation. So we can really see that each of these is a layer and a conversation that is really, really incredible. And I'm seeing one of the themes coming out for the next session might be this link between just food systems and clean, healthy water. What do we mean when we talk about that? Or just food systems and a circular economy. So thank you so much, Susanna, that's really useful. Are there any other questions, comments, thoughts? I'm not seeing any hands, so there we go, Matthew and Tim. And then Siyabonga, you can come in. Matthew, I see your hand.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I strongly support what people are saying about food being a human right and the need to assert that right through mass action. What I also wanted to pick up on is in terms of injustice, how that's not just in the production of food, it's also in the processing of food, and that's also where a lot of harm comes in nutrition, in the processing of food, and it's a process in which not only are people's economic rights stripped away, but also culture is actually stripped out of the food, and that links back to the issue of processing of food and traditional ways of processing food around the world that preserve food and enhance its nutritional value, which are still available to us, but are not widely available to poor people anymore. And the role that community kitchens can have as part of sustainability and building a food economy in restoring those livelihoods in food. And I found the ideas around kitchens as co-ops and using the buying power of those co-ops very inspiring examples from other parts.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That's great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Tim?
Hi there. I'm also from Makhanda, Grahamstown, and work with Ntuthu to quite a degree. And thanks for her pointer in that direction around rights and food. One of the things we've identified is that within the local municipality, when you start digging, you find that there is no food security policy for the Makhanda. And if you go into the integrated development plan, it is also not reflected there as a priority, barely touched on. So yeah, we've got the advantage here of the university, and we're working a lot. We've got a lot of support from different departments, particularly the ELRC, the environmental learning. But within that, we need to be developing sort of good practice when it comes to policy. And I think if this group could put out, I mean, the council here, I'm sure, would be prepared to look at and even adopt. And I'm a great believer in borrowing with pride and taking other people's ideas and translating them across if they are workable. So developing documents that actually can be fed into IDPs, fed into policy, and land planning as well would help a lot. At least it creates the environment in which it all becomes possible, and you can point to policy and say, this is your policy, help us. Whereas at the moment, it's just missing. And it's because it's missing from the conversations. If you listen to council meetings, it's hardly touched on. Yeah. And we've got a situation here where we have a joint operational command unit that was sitting weekly. It's now fortnightly for COVID. And they constantly badger us to tell us. I mean, Ntuthu didn't mention, but we've got over 30 kitchens in total. We support for 25 of them and have been increasingly since March at the costs of hundreds of thousands of rands that we've had to raise. they want us reporting back on all our work, but there's been not one offer of help from the municipality on any of these issues. So, okay.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
So I'm just looking at the time. Sorry, Siyabonga, I've run over a little bit. I think very quickly we've put up a Mentimeter, like we did in the last call around what does it mean to talk about to be democratic or democratic practice. And we really found some beautiful answers and thoughts. And so we felt it would be useful for this conversation to do something similar. So if you have a chance, we will put it up on the Facebook page as well. But it's to share your thoughts. It's been put in the chat group. I don't know if you can put it on a slide, Karen, to share your if people can see it and what the code is, so they can access it. Because we want to take this conversation further. As Mark Hayward has said in the chat, I just saw, we need a food action campaign. Oh no, I was about to make it an acronym and it wasn't going to sound polite. So I think, you know, this speaks to so much of what we do on a daily basis. It's the grounding of what it is to be part of what it means to be a human, to be a person, to be part of this earth. And the conversations that we've had have enabled us to think more creatively about our environment, how we're connected to our sidewalks, how we're connected to our backyards, how we're connected to our water sources, how we're connected to our energy sources, and how we're connected to this planet. So I think there's many conversations to take forward, and I'm so looking forward to how we share and deepen these conversations. And we can definitely have a session around policy. Should we be thinking ward-based versus city-based versus, you know, what are the options available? So big round of applause, big thank you. Mark says there's a talk at 6 with Tracy Ledger. If you haven't read her book, I recommend you do. It's called An Empty Plate. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Please clap, clap, clap wherever you are. Put your mics on. Give a big woo! Veggie Stockfell. Woo, woo, woo! We will be picking fruit in the gardens.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Food justice for all. Woo! Yes. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you so much, Toko.
Thank you. How was that?
Yeah, fun. I think, yeah, they're just always too short, hey?
I know.
Once you get going, it just always feels like, oh, we would need
more
we would need a proper workshop on this, don't you think?
Yeah. Cool, no, but we'll debrief and think of the next one. I think there's some nice ideas coming.
Yeah, I think, yeah, a few kind of logical connections. No, but well done. Thanks, Toko, and it was lovely to see you like this again.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
Have a good one.
Bye.